All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really profound paradox from an insightful article by Got Questions. It asks what seems like a totally impossible question. How on earth can a supreme deity be perfectly just and perfectly merciful at the exact same time? When you think about it, these two concepts are basically like two freight trains heading straight for each other. It's a fascinating philosophical tension, and we're going to break down exactly how the source material navigates this ancient mystery.
So here's our roadmap for this explainer. 1. The paradox of two traits. 2. The Bible's dual claims. 3. How other religions respond. 4. The unique Christian solution. And 5. The end result.
Starting off with Section 1, the paradox of two traits.
Okay, let's look at how the article defines justice. It is entirely uncompromising. The source states that justice inherently means the dispensing of deserved punishment for wrongdoing. It demands a penalty, period. If a rule is broken, a price literally has to be paid. Justice is exact, it's blind, and it definitely doesn't just let things slide. If someone does something wrong, justice says they absolutely must face the exact consequences of that action. Keep that absolute, non-negotiable requirement in the back of your mind.
But then, right next to justice, we have this definition of mercy, pardon and compassion for an offender. Now, the crucial point the article is making here is that these two traits seem completely and utterly incompatible. I mean, one demands that the offender is punished, right? And the other wants to toss the penalty out the window out of pure compassion. So how can a deity actually hold both of these together? If you're perfectly merciful, haven't you just abandoned justice? And if you execute perfect justice, where's the room for mercy? It's a massive philosophical knot.
Which brings us to Section 2, the Bible's dual claims.
To put this into perspective, the source highlights a staggering number to show just how prominent this idea of mercy really is. There are over 360 verses in the Bible that contain direct statements about God's mercy toward His people. We're talking over 290 in the Old Testament and another 70 in the New Testament. So, this isn't just some fringe concept. It is a central, deeply repeated theme of the entire text.
And to really put a face to that number, the article points straight to the book of Jonah. When the whole city of Nineveh repented, God actually showed them mercy. And Jonah describes God like this: a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and abounding in love, a God who relents from sending calamity. That is a beautiful, clear picture of mercy, but it sets up some major tension with the rest of the text.
Because right alongside that vast compassion, the Bible insists on absolute, unwavering justice. Take Deuteronomy 32:4, which says, "He is the rock, His works are perfect, and all His ways are just." The article emphasizes that God's perfect justice and His impending wrath over sin are also absolutely foundational characteristics. In fact, the Apostle Paul in the New Testament makes the case that because of all the earthly evils and injustices, the wrath of God is coming. So the Bible is boldly claiming both things: a deity who is entirely merciful and a deity who will absolutely dispense justice on the sin of the world.
Moving right along to Section 3, how other religions respond.
The article poses this highly relatable thought experiment. Would a human judge act this way? Seriously, imagine you're sitting in a human courtroom. A criminal is on trial, and they are clearly guilty of a terrible offense. Now, imagine the judge just looks at the criminal and says, "You know what? Out of the goodness of my heart, I pardon you. You're completely free to go." What would happen? Well, as the article notes, most people would be outraged. It is a judge's absolute duty to see that the law is upheld and justice is served. A judge who just ignores the law to be merciful is actually betraying their entire office. It creates a fundamentally unjust world.
So, the source text makes a really interesting comparative claim here. According to the article, in every other non-Christian religion that holds to a supreme deity, and it specifically points to Islam as an example, mercy is exercised at the expense of justice. Meaning, to grant that mercy, the deity simply dismisses the penalties of the broken law. The moral requirement is basically set aside so mercy can step in. They're at odds. But the text argues Christianity makes a highly unique claim. Mercy doesn't bypass justice. Mercy happens through justice. There is absolutely zero setting aside of the law.
Okay, Part 4, the unique Christian solution.
The core mechanism the source provides for how this works is a doctrine known as penal substitution. Let's break that phrase down really quickly. Penal relates to a penalty or punishment, and substitution obviously means taking the place of another. This Christian doctrine states that sin and injustice were actually punished at the cross of Christ. The penalty wasn't just swept under the rug, it was satisfied completely through Christ's sacrifice. And because that justice was fully served, God can now extend His mercy to undeserving sinners.
The source frames this as the ultimate courtroom solution. The penalty of sin isn't ignored. It is perfectly satisfied by Christ's sacrifice. And through this action, God's righteousness is publicly demonstrated for all to see. At the cross, these two opposing traits perfectly intersect. Justice is meted out in full upon Christ, and simultaneously, mercy is extended in full to believers. God's perfect mercy is exercised entirely through his perfect justice. Neither one is compromised even a little bit.
To really ground this idea, the article maps out the Apostle Paul's argument in Romans chapter 3. It's like a giant timeline, starting all the way back with Adam and Eve, when sin enters the world. They weren't immediately destroyed, right? Judgment was delayed. Then, for all of pre-Christ humanity, God operated in what Paul calls forbearance. He basically left sins that were committed beforehand unpunished at that specific time, planning for a redeemer down the line. Finally, we arrive at the cross. Here, God demonstrates his righteousness. He proves that he hasn't just been ignoring sin for centuries, he was actually saving the ultimate execution of justice for this exact moment, the ultimate sacrifice of atonement.
Which brings us to our final section, Part 5, the end result. The practical takeaway drawn from Romans 8 and 5:9 is highly personal. According to the text, the end result of this massive theological paradox being solved is that everyone who trusts in the Lord Jesus is saved from God's perfectly just wrath and instead gets to experience his grace and mercy. Because the penalty was paid in full on the cross, the ultimate judge can legally and rightfully declare the offender completely free.
Which leaves us with this final thought to really ponder. If perfect justice and perfect mercy were actually reconciled at the cross, if grace isn't just God ignoring the rules but God fulfilling them at an incredibly great cost to himself, how does that alter your understanding of grace? It totally shifts the perspective from just a casual pardon to a profound, legally binding rescue. I really hope this explainer has helped you visualize and grasp the mechanics behind this ancient theological puzzle. Take a little time to reflect on that final question, and thanks for exploring this with us.